The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Welcome to Rudy's Revelation. Finding revelation in the news and meaning in media. It's Sunday, January 17th, 2021. Today I'll be talking back to the Sunday Talking Heads on CBS Face the Nation, where incoming CDC Director Rochelle Walensky and the former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb push for a virus detection surveillance program that would mandate testing. Also be checking in on Sunday morning propaganda at our favorite feel-good feature news program, CBS Sunday Morning, where 60 Minutes correspondent John Dickerson talks with New Yorker writer Jill Lepore, New York Times columnist Jamel Bowie, and Washington columnist Michael Gerson on how the left plans to marginalize Trump supporters post-inauguration. I'll be tearing into the Sunday New York Times, showing how the newspaper continually mischaracterizes the facts to mislead the public. And of course, I'll be going over the weekend headlines, all in the next 30 minutes. But first, I'll be taking you back to school, giving you some historical context to frame this week's news narratives. The word of the day is illusory.
Based on or producing illusion, deceptive.
And the reason I'm getting into illusory, causing illusion, deceptive, misleading, of the nature of an illusion, unreal, fallacious, specious, false, imaginary, visionary, and fancied, is because of what's happening today in today's news media. Now, the grand illusion, and in Vedic terms, the idea that the external world is an illusion, was greeted by the 19th century European thinkers as proof of India's inability to cope with the practical world. But as we moved into a high-tech era, its media images and virtual realities, the 21st century, our world is becoming more and more like Maya every day. There is a deep meaning to Maya that must be understood for any true cosmic or self-knowledge to develop, including spirituality and science. Now, Maya in Indian philosophy, in Sanskrit, means magic or illusion. It's a fundamental concept in Hindu philosophy, most notably in the non-dualist school of Vedanta. Maya originally denoted the magic power which with a god can make human beings believe in what turns out to be an illusion. By extension, it later came to mean the powerful force that creates the cosmic illusion that the phenomenal world is real. For the non-dualists, Maya is thus that cosmic force that represents the infinite Brahman, the supreme being, as a finite phenomenal world. Maya is reflected on the individual level by human ignorance. Maya in the mortal world, the world in which we live, is not very different from the Hall of Illusions. It is a giant illusion in itself where our egos grow in strength, experience emotions, and where we assume one thing from another and suffer from confusion, delusion, and emotional turmoil. And that's from the Indian Vedic Maya. Now, from the Foundation for Economic Education, 6 political illusions, a primer on government for idealists fed up with history repeating itself. Now, as we mentioned before, the illusion, or Maya, in Vedic philosophy was referred to as magic. Magic is harmless fun, but the government is not. It squanders vast amounts of money while simultaneously whittling away at people's freedom. Instead of solving problems, it makes them worse, often creating brand new problems. Why don't more of us rebel or at least denounce the state? In his latest book, political scientist and Freeman contributing editor James Payne explains why not. Most Americans have fallen for 6 political illusions, although opinion polls show that a large majority of the population is fed up with government. Most think we must continue to rely on it for a wide array of services. They just want better politicians in charge. Those people aren't stupid. They're under the spell of the following illusions. And here he has them lined up. The philanthropic illusion, the idea that government has money of its own. The voluntary illusion, the impulse to want to believe that government is an action, that government action is not based on force. The illusion of a frictionless state, the idea that the state can transfer resources with negligible overhead cost. The materialistic illusion that money alone buys public policy results. The watchful eye illusion, the idea that government has greater knowledge and wisdom than the public. And the illusion of government preeminence, to believe that government is the only problem-solving institution in society. And they go on, Payne admonishes people to start examining government as it really is, not the way children see magic. As far as the illusion is concerned, and many of us are overtaken with the illusion, especially the way the media is perpetuating false narratives. And what they usually do is they get a hold on things like false flag operations. And if any of you don't know the definition of false flag, a false flag, this is from Wikipedia, a false flag operation is an act committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and pinning the blame on a second party. The term is popular among conspiracy theory promoters in referring to covert operations of various governments and cabals. Want to know false flag, summary of false flag operations and false flag terrorism. And it goes, this article goes into a bunch of historical false flags. The Nazis in Operation Himmler faked attacks on their own people and resources which they blamed on the Poles to justify the invasion of Poland. In the early 1950s, agents of the Israeli terrorist cell operating in Egypt planted bombs in several buildings, including U.S. diplomatic facilities, then left behind evidence implicating the Arabs as the culprits. The Russian KGB apparently conducted a wave of bombings in Russia in order to justify a war against Chechnya. And there are many, many more. If you need to find out more about false flags, you should look into Operation Gladio, which stay-behind networks in Europe posed as leftist groups and conducted bombings and kidnappings. False flag, the definition, a political or military action that is made to appear to have been carried out by a group that is not actually responsible. So if you want to look at the Capitol insurrection, if anybody wants to look at the videos, you could plainly see that people dressed as Black Bloc, Antifa, carried out most of the property damage. But of course, PolitiFact from the Poynter Institute says there is no evidence to support baseless. Why do you have to put baseless claims? If you say there's no evidence to support claims, but you know that they're covering their tracks here when they say there's no evidence to support baseless claims that what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th was staged or a psychological operation or a false flag. A mob of President Donald Trump supporters, that can't be proven because you didn't interview the people that did actual damage or broke into the Capitol and asked them whether they're Donald Trump supporters. But PolitiFact says it's a baseless claim with no evidence to support it, that a mob of President Donald Trump supporters stormed the Capitol after he delivered a speech in which he insisted he won the election, repeated falsehoods about the election, and urged the crowd to march to Congress. But online, another narrative is unfolding as some deny what happened and instead push false flag claims. The moment we realize this is a staged psyop, someone tweeted, sharing a video of Capitol Police officer retreating as a mob of people walked towards him. Now, I'm not going to go into this whole PolitiFact article, but you need to understand is that this is disinformation. If you want to look at the videos, you could look. From my opinion, looking at, you could see that the people doing the damage were young, wiry-looking folks that look like Antifa.
Less than 3% of you people read books.
So, our reading recommendation of the day is The Political Illusion by Jacques Ellul, which is a very popular book. The author of The Technological Society and Propaganda here examines modern man's passion for politics, the role he plays in them, and his place in the modern state. He holds that everything having now been politicized, anything not directly political fails to arouse widespread interest among contemporary men and, in fact, might be said not to exist. He shows that political activity is now a kaleidoscope of interlocking illusions, among which the most basic and damaging are those of popular participation in government, popular control of elected and other officials, and popular solution of public problems. The domination by the political illusion, Ellul demonstrates, explains why men now turn to the state for the solution of all their problems, of them problems that the state could not solve if it tried. The close reasoned, brilliant diagnosis and prognosis is, like Jacques Ellul's earlier books, an alarming analysis of present-day life. So that's my reading recommendation. I got one more here, News, the Politics of Illusion. And in this book, News, the Politics of Illusion has not simply reflected the political communication field, it has played a major role in shaping it. Today, the familiar news organizations of the legacy press are operating in a fragmenting and expanding mediaverse that resembles a big bang of proliferating online competitors that are challenging the very definition of news itself. Audience-powered sites such as the Huffington Post and Vox blend conventional political reporting with opinion blogs, celebrity gossip, and other ephemera aimed at getting clicks and shares. At the same time, the rise of serious investigative organizations as ProPublica presents yet a different challenge to legacy journalism. Going to get into the headlines. This is from Bloomberg News. Upbeat G says time on China's side as turmoil grips U.S. President Xi Jinping issued an unusually upbeat assessment about China's future, noting that time and situation are on the country's side in a new year marked by domestic turmoil in the United States. From the New York Times, the FBI questions dozens in killing of Capitol Police officer and other assaults by pro-Trump mob. And we haven't seen video or any evidence about the officer who was said to be struck by a fire extinguisher. Because we have footage of the guys with the fire extinguishers. We just don't have any video of the assault. From the Washington Post, Biden plans a flurry of executive orders, new legislation for first day as president. Now, we all know what he's going to be doing. He's going to be undoing most of what Trump did. President-elect Joe Biden plans to swiftly alter the shape of the U.S. government with an aspirational inauguration speech, a legislative package aimed at coronavirus recovery, more spending, and a burst of executive orders designed to signal immediate break from President Trump. Return of the United States of the Paris Climate Accord, repeal the ban for citizens from majority Muslim countries. He will sign an order extending nationwide restrictions on evictions and foreclosures and implement a mask mandate on federal property. Oh boy, hope everybody's ready. Let us in, Joe. Caravan of 1,000 Honduran migrants marches towards U.S. border and asks Biden to honor his commitments to asylum seekers. Now, if people didn't believe that policy regarding legal immigration is incentive for more people to come to the country, you're wrong, because here we have another caravan of 1,000 Honduran migrants. This is from the Daily Mail. Josh Hawley's Florida fundraiser canceled by Lowe's Hotels after liberal lawyer posts flyer online. This is from Fox News. Earlier this month, Hawley lost a deal with publisher Simon & Schuster, which canceled the senator's book, The Tyranny of Big Tech. From the Wall Street Journal, GOP freshmen mock masks, embrace gun rights, spar with colleagues. Lawmakers including Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert stir controversy over divisive issues including election challenge. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Pushed to the edge by Capitol riot, people are reporting their family and friends to the FBI. And here it goes. Talk about Maoist China. This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Atlanta's deadliest year in decades as city on edge and demanding change. Well, that's what happens when you defund the police. You get a growth in crime. A teen selling water bottles killed over $10. A young man shot at a skate park. A child gunned down on the 4th of July. Their deaths were among the 157 homicides the Atlanta Police Department investigated in 2020, up from 99 in 2019, and the most in more than 2 decades. We go on to the next story. Parler's deplatforming shows the exceptional power of cloud providers like Amazon. This is from Reuters. German minister says COVID curbs should be eased for vaccinated people. Here we go with the Sesame credit score, or your social credit score. So if you get the vaccination, you get to do things like travel. People who have been vaccinated against COVID-19 should be allowed to go to restaurants and cinemas earlier than others, the German minister said. It's called medical tyranny, and it's the way to ease you into a social credit score system and vaccination identification. From Yahoo News, attack on Capitol was just the beginning of an American insurgency, counterterrorism experts warn. With President Trump only days away from the unceremonious departure from the White House, the vision of a mob desecrating the citadel of democracy felt, for many observers, like the end of a shameful period of norm-breaking and tradition shaming. But the counterterrorism experts who have spent the 2 decades since the 9/11 terrorist attack closely studying and fighting violent extremist groups overseas, the spectacle looked like something altogether different. The likely birthing of a violent American insurgency. That's what they just want to do with this false flag, and it is demonizing all Trump supporters as domestic terrorists. Harry Reid tried to do this back with the Bundy Ranch escapade. And the people just aren't terrorists. I mean, people, you could call it a riot because there was a large protest that result in the damage of property. That's considered a riot. And those have been going on all summer. And this is from Wired. I'm not a soldier, but I've been trained to kill. A sprawling tactical industry is teaching American civilians how to fight like special ops forces. By preparing for violence at home, are they calling it into being? Basically, if anybody ever looked into it, there's plenty of tactical training to be had out there. And they're weekend warriors and militia guys and people LARPing. The best thing you could do is prepare for a time. If there's a collapse in civilization, you want to be prepared. You want to have a firearm. You want to have food. You want to have a generator. Just so in the first couple of weeks or the first couple of months, you don't fall into misery with everybody else who is unprepared. Major NRA donor to challenge gun group's bankruptcy over alleged fraud. Complaint could stop top NRA executives from discharging a substantial portion of the organization's debts. Major donor to the National Rifle Association is poised to challenge key aspects of the gun group's bankruptcy filing in an attempt to hold the executives accountable for allegedly having defrauded their members of millions of dollars to support their own lavish lifestyle. Of course, this is going after the NRA, which is the only lobbying group protecting the Second Amendment, which is inalienable. From Yahoo News, Capitol riot was a false flag operation by leftists, Trump backers claim, with no basis. Now, we just went into this from the PolitiFact, again, with no basis. You could go ahead and look at the video. It's full of Antifa people, and then some other people who seem to be like sheep-dipped military types. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't know about that. But what I do know is that there were Antifa, some of them in black bloc, that didn't even try to disguise their appearance. As an angry mob stormed the Capitol of the U.S. on Wednesday, vandalizing offices, occupying the House and Senate chambers, and sending legislators and staffers running for cover, several of President Trump's key allies knew just where to cast the blame on the loose-knit movement of left-wing agitators known as Antifa, a favorite boogeyman of Trump and the right wing for the last several years. Do you know what black bloc is? Did you look at the video? Did you see them there? And then there are others that are obviously disguised as Trump supporters, wearing patriotic paraphernalia. They were undeterred by video showing rioters in MAGA hats carrying Trump 2020 flags. They weren't rioters. The people that were fighting with police and the people that were breaking windows were in black bloc. So, I mean, anybody could just, this is a story by Caitlin Dixon. I guess she didn't look at all the video. What kind of reporter is this? Trump himself has exhorted to them to disrupt the counting of the Electoral College votes submitted by the states, the final step in certifying Joe Biden's victory. To them, that just showed the insurrection was actually a leftist false flag operation meant to embarrass the president's peaceful supporters. Sorta. Yeah, if you look at all the people breaking the windows, they're all Antifa. They're all in black bloc. The first people up on the steps were in black bloc. You could see them. So we're carrying into the New York Times. And of course, we're getting back to decoding far-right symbols of the Capitol mob. And this is they have this picture here. And I know some of you are listening, so I'm just going to describe it. They have a picture of a Trump. It looks like people are posing for a photo, but a bunch of Trump supporters. And here I could even point out some people in black bloc. Antifa, Antifa, Antifa. Because you could tell that Trump supporters don't dress in black bloc. And then, so they point out all the symbols. And for those of you on the right, most people know like the Gadsden flag and the Q flag and where they got Punisher skull. And, they pick out, there were like so few Confederate flags, but they pick them all out. There were the 3%ers there. And there was also Oath Keepers. So a lot of these people, but here in the photo, it looks like they photoshopped in people using the OK sign. So, whether that's white supremacy or not, it looks like it's Photoshop. But people are doing the OK sign, which I guess the ADL says is white supremacist. I mean, people have been doing OK forever. And I think they don't really understand the melange of viewpoints in this whole thing. So they talk about Keck, and this is an article by Matthew Rosenberg and Inera Tiefenhaller. Militiamen, the lead goes off, militiamen showed up proudly bearing the emblems of their groups, the American flags with the stars replaced by the Roman numeral 3, patches that read Oath Keepers, alt-right types wore Pepe the Frog masks, and QAnon adherents could be seen in t-shirts urging people to trust the plan. In Hong Kong, a new party calls for stability and raises suspicions. Democracy advocates call the Buanhinia party a Trojan horse for the Chinese government. But Beijing's local allies are wary of it too. U.S. is blind to contagious new virus variant. Scientists warn, and we'll be getting into that later. It's not too late to curb the contagious virus spread in the U.S., experts say, but only with a national program for genetic sequencing, and that means testing. With no robust system to identify genetic variants, of the coronavirus, experts warn that the United States is woefully ill-equipped to track a dangerous new mutant, leaving health officials blind as they try to combat the grave threat. What they're trying to do is get you into a national testing regimen, hunting down these dangerous new mutations. Post-Trump, Republicans are headed for a bitter internal showdown. GOP leadership would like to blunt President Trump's influence over the party. Mr. Trump and his allies want to punish those who have crossed him. A series of clashes to loom. This is an article by Alexander Burns and Jonathan Martin. As President Trump prepares to leave office with his party in disarray, Republican leaders, including Senator Mitch McConnell, are maneuvering to thwart his grip on the GOP in the future elections, while forces aligned with Mr. Trump are looking to punish Republican lawmakers and governors who have broken with him. The bitter infighting underscores the deep divisions Mr. Trump has created in the GOP and all but ensures the next campaign will represent a pivotal test for the party's direction, with a series of clashes looming in the months ahead. Most people know that the Republican Party has become the party of the middle class and not the elites. It's a populist party now. And if the GOP does not adapt to its new electorate demographic, they're going to be either voted out or the party will lose power. So we always end up in the Sunday Review, which is the week of opinion pieces and editorials. And of course, it's all about the quote-unquote insurrection. But I find quite a dichotomy here, because one piece by Catherine Stewart, The Roots of Josh Hawley's Rage. Why do so many Republicans appear to be at war with both truth and democracy? This isn't true at all. Josh Hawley was elected by picking up the mantle of what the electorate wanted. And she goes on to say, in today's Republican Party, the path to power is to build up a lie in order to overturn democracy. At least that is what Senator Josh Hawley was telling us when he offered a clenched fist salute to the pro-Trump mob just before it ransacked the Capitol. And it was in the same message he delivered on the floor of the Senate in the aftermath of the attack, when he doubled down the lies about electoral fraud that incited the insurrection in the first place. How did we get to the point where one bright young star of the Republican Party appears to be at war with both truth and democracy? Ms. Stewart doesn't really understand that there was voter fraud, and because people aren't paying attention to it or even looking at it, because that's all, people want a fair shake, so we want people in charge to look at the evidence. But no one looked at it. No court looked at it. It was just dismissed out of hand. That makes people angry. But I found the dichotomy here because they have this, the roots of Josh Hawley's rage. And one of Josh Hawley's big policy platforms is being anti-communist, particularly being at odds with the influence the communist Chinese have in this country. But what do we have on the back page of the opinion week in review? It took a genocide for me to remember my Uyghur roots. Since 1949, the Chinese Communist Party has gradually established policies that threaten Uyghur culture and identity. My family's forced assimilation is part of that story, by Amelia Pang. Ms. Pang is a journalist of Chinese and Uyghur descent and the author of the forthcoming book, Made in China, A Prisoner, a SOS Letter, and a Hidden Cost of America's Cheap Goods. So what I don't understand is we have these two different op-ed pieces that are at odds with each other. This one woman talking about what has happened with the forced labor of the Uyghur minority group in China. So, and of course, we're going to leave you with the talking heads. And we're going to start off with Scott Gottlieb and Rochelle Walensky, who is the incoming CDC director for Joe Biden. And they talk about a virus detection surveillance program that would mandate testing.
Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is? Because there's a lot of questions right now about these reports of new strains out of the UK, out of Brazil, out of South Africa. What are you hearing? What concerns you about these new strains?
So the first thing I want to indicate is that viruses mutate. We've known for a long time that viruses mutate. It's not just coronavirus. But what increased transmissibility means is there are more cases and therefore more deaths. There are certainly further studies that are looking at the South Africa strain, at the Brazil strain, at other strains in Nigeria. And one of the things that this really demonstrates is our need to be vigilant and to have resources to do the surveillance, to make sure we understand what strains are here.
You just said something I want to go back to on the question of surveillance. Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is? How are you going to fix that?
And one of the things I'm really going to advocate for, and I know the president-elect is advocating for, is to make sure that we have the resources for our public health system so that we can do the surveillance that is necessary for that testing.
You can set that up quickly enough?
They're working on it right now.
Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is?
As the CDC director said, we're not doing a lot of surveillance work right now, so we're probably not detecting the full scope of what's underway in this country.
Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is? I want to clarify there because we just spoke with the incoming CDC director who recognized that there is not a good surveillance system in place to figure out these new mutations. Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is?
We haven't found any of the B1351 variant, that's the South African and Brazilian variant, but we have just started looking for it. What we're finding is B117, so it's about 0.3 to 0.5% of all infections as of this weekend, data that's available right now.
Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is?
As the CDC director said, we're not doing a lot of surveillance work right now, so we're probably not detecting the full scope of what's underway in this country.
Americans now aged 2 years old and up will have to show proof of a negative COVID test to re-enter this country, even if they're a citizen. Will that make a difference, these kind of travel restrictions, in reducing these other strains from permeating?
It's hard to estimate how much it's going to really affect introduction into the United States. And the bottom line is these strains are already here. Even B1351 is probably in the United States now, even though we haven't detected yet. I think testing people as they come in, you're going to catch some cases, but it's also going to be a deterrent. If they know there's a surveillance system in place, they're going to be less likely to get on a plane because they're not going to want to get caught in a quarantine. So I think it's going to be more effective as a deterrent than actually catching positive cases as they come in. But it's something, it's something that we can do. I just think we need to be honest with ourselves that these strains are here right now.
Why don't we as a country have a better system to detect which virus, which mutation, and where it is? 1351 is what you're calling South African strain, is that correct? Everyone take notes.
All right, and then we're going to leave you with 60 Minutes correspondent John Nickerson, who talks with, in particular, Jamel Bowie, and on how the left plans to marginalize Trump supporters post-inauguration.
They have to be legitimate opinions.
They have to be legitimate opinions.
So I think a comparison would be 9/11, which in many ways is a very different political moment and an entirely different instance of violence. It was essentially an act of war. But I think at that time, Americans understood that something profoundly had changed.
It was, at least by one reading, the president inciting a mob to go after the legislature.
They have to be legitimate opinions.
Even with the president out of office, very soon, it'll still be a crisis, not because he's there, but because we have learned something about the political system. We have learned something about what is possible. and what at least some faction of American voters and American lawmakers believe about the nature of our democracy, which is that if they cannot win, then the person who does, or the party that does, isn't legitimate. House divided usually refers to sort of political division, but the literal metaphor was a house cannot stand that way. It must be one thing or it must be the other thing.
Right. The House divided speech is not, now let's all come together. It's one side has to win this argument.
There's no alternative over a long time horizon in which we can have a faction of Americans who look at the Capitol attack and see that as something to emulate or something to repeat or something that's laudatory. Like that cannot coexist with constitutional government as we understand it.
President Trump's apocalyptic theater with himself as the protector of Christianity.
Politics needs to be supple. There needs to be give and take. You have to be able to tolerate the political opinions of your political opponent. They have to be legitimate opinions. They can't be heresies.
They have to be legitimate opinions.
And that merging of religion and politics over the course of the 20th century, we see the cost of that now.
I think you have to allow room for people that have supported Trump over the years to find a different way of doing politics. You can't dismiss them as forever tainted. And that's, I think, what they should be looking for right now, is a way to give a refuge, a rhetorical refuge.
They have to be legitimate opinions.
Right, that's it for us. We'll see you next week. Check us out, Facebook and Twitter. Rudy's Revelation.